Welcome everyone, my name is Rigel, and today let's take a look at what we know so far about Eurovision 2024 as of October of 2023. Now, I'm kind of lying, as you can probably tell. I know it's November, but last night I was going to record the video and then I accidentally fell asleep around like 10 p.m. So yeah, I'm doing this now. We haven't had anything happen today yet, so this is effectively what has happened with regards to Eurovision 2024 as of the 31st of October. So with that said, let's get into the basics of Eurovision 2024. It's going to be hosted in Sweden because Sweden won last year. Or well, this year, but it won 2023, so Sweden are hosting 2024. It will be hosted in the city of Malmö because Stockholm wanted to do this weird pop-up arena thing, and then people were like, this is too expensive, so let's just go to Malmö. We'll be at the Malmö Arena, which also hosted 2013, and you can see that the executive producer is Ebba Adilson, but we will get to the whole crew later on. So far, we will have 35 countries take part in Eurovision 2024. However, we haven't gotten the official participant list yet. What we do know so far is that Luxembourg will be returning to the contest, and I'll talk about Luxembourg a little later on. And if you look over here, it's pretty much the same stuff as I just mentioned. We'll be going to the Malmö Arena, and there were also a number of other cities that had put in a bid, but ultimately it was Malmö, which is very close to Copenhagen, by the way, who succeeded. So with that said, let's get on to the countries that will take part in Eurovision 2024. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we haven't gotten the country list yet, and I suspect we won't get it for a little while, for two places that I want to mention, and I'll talk about them when we get to them. So, with that said, let's get to by alphabetical order. Let's start with Albania. With Albania, they are having the national final Festivali Këngës as usual. This edition is the 62nd edition, and here it says TBD December. However, according to OGAE Albania, you can see it will be held from the 19th to the 22nd of December. Now, this hasn't been confirmed by RTSH, like in any public statement. However, I would tend to trust OGAE Albania, so I would say we are having Fickmas again. If you remember, a couple of years ago we would have Fickmas, which is basically when Festivali Këngës is held very close to Christmas. So yeah, this year we will have Fickmas for our national selection for Albania. Speaking of that, we also have the participant list of Festivali Këngës 62. Now, despite previous rumors, we did not get Elvana Jata. I suspect she might come back in some other edition, but not this year, unfortunately. What we did get this year was Elsa Lila. If you remember Elsa Lila from last year, and also sometime in the 90s, I think. Elsa Lila has now won the jury in Festivali Këngës 3 times and has never gone to Eurovision, and I suspect this is why she's returning. She wants to do Eurovision now, and in any case, her song is called Mars, which I believe in Albanian actually means March, the month of March. So yeah, there's that. There's also some other returnees whose names I cannot remember right now. And so we have a few returnees. We also have a bunch of newer names in there. It's also been announced that this year, unlike previous years, we will have 50% jury and 50% televote instead of 100% televote last year and 100% jury the years before that. So this year it will be half jury, half televote, and according to people who are more knowledgeable of the Albanian music industry than I am, Elsa Lila actually has a pretty good chance of winning. And there's also another possible favorites for the show, and I can't remember her surname, but her first name was Bessa, something like that, Besa. She's also involved in Festival de Conga 62. So that's our first official national final that will result in selecting an artist and song. And speaking of song, the songs will not be revealed until the live shows actually happen. This is pretty much the same as they do in Italy with, San Remo. Except basically this time I don't think the press get to listen to it either. So yeah, we will have to wait until December to find out what the songs of Festival de Conga 62 sound like. So if that's it, let's move on to Austria, where we don't actually have a lot to talk about. You can see here that it says TBA by December 2023, and that's because the talent scout of ORF basically wrote another long-winded Facebook post about all the Eurovision participants. The people who have applied to their selection, and there was initially this idea that they would do like a kind of online vote. However, apparently because of security reasons, that's not really possible. So yeah, they're going to return to a national, not a national final actually, an internal selection. And it's not clear who's been selected. There's no like favorites or anything, but we will apparently get the name by December. So you can look out for that if you're interested. Moving on to Azerbaijan, they are returning to internal selections as usual, but this year they've done a thing where they've been a little bit more transparent about the process, I think, because Eldar Gasimov actually joined the delegation, and actually they've quite recently, in fact a few days ago, they posted a video about kind of the whole selection process and the whole audition process, and so far they've actually narrowed it down to 15 finalists, I think, which you can see right here, and one of those you can see right there, a very familiar name if you followed Eurovision for a few years. That's Isol from 2018, I believe. That was X My Heart, which was also the only time that Azerbaijan didn't qualify, before 2023. So yeah, we will have Isol. We also have all these other people in the roster, I guess. So one of these people will be representing Azerbaijan in Eurovision 2024. We don't really know when the announcement will be made, but according to official sources, it is soon. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to Belgium, where we have Musti, who was selected way back, I believe, in September. This was actually the first artist for 2024 to be officially selected, and I don't really have much to talk about here because basically nothing has happened on the end of Belgium. Basically, they said that the song is going to come out in February, as seen here. But other than that, we don't really have much. In the meantime, you can go and listen to Musti's music. He's a pretty good singer and artist. His music is kind of more like dark pop. Some people have likened it to Duncan Lawrence somehow, but I don't really know. But yeah, he's also a judge on Drag Race Belgium, I think. So, like I mentioned in the previous video, maybe RTBF are trying to out-gay VRT. So maybe that's happening. Who knows? That said, let's move on to Croatia, where again we don't really have much to talk about. They're just going back to their national final Dora, which will take place in February. The entire format is the same: the number of participants, the number of reserves, which is 4. I can't remember the exact number of participants though. So yeah, they're returning to the national final Dora. It will take place in the city of Opatia, and that's about all we know so far. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to Cyprus, where Celia Capsis has now been officially selected. Now, in the previous video, or maybe the video before that, I joked that maybe they decided to deselect Celia Capsis, but no, Celia Capsis has been selected, and basically she's 16 years old. However, I would say in terms of like performing in front of big audiences, I would say Celia Capsis is a lot more experienced. She's Australian Cypriot, and there's been some criticism about that. You know, why couldn't Cyprus send a singer who's actually from Cyprus? Well, according to people actually from Cyprus, they basically don't have a music industry. So, yeah, that's why often Cyprus resorts to sending diaspora, like they did last year and like they will do this year. Now, we don't really know much about her song. However, judging by the type of music that she herself has produced, it's probably going to be like an upbeat song, and it will be written by Dimitris Kantopoulos. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, that's because he's part of the so-called Dream Team, this kind of Greek-Russian group who was responsible for a lot of the Greek and or Russian entries in previous years, and also Moldova 2021 as well, I believe. And Dimitris Kantopoulos is one of the songwriters of the group. So, yeah, he's behind this. I believe he also kind of produced Die Together as well. And yeah, so he will be writing the song for Celia Capsis. We don't know when the song is going to come out, but I would reckon is probably some sort of upbeat song, and it's most likely going to be in English. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to Czechia. Now, I think, as with most Eurofans, I think there was some concern over whether Czechia would randomly just withdraw, but in the end they did not, and in fact they will return to their national final ESCZ, also known as Eurovision Song CZ, I think. And basically, what they're doing here is they're trying to, obviously they're trying to select a song to represent Czechia to go to Eurovision. Now, the rules aren't too different. However, there is one key difference among this whole thing, where basically, previously it was only Czech citizens who could apply to represent Czechia in Eurovision. However, now they have expanded this to Slovak citizens, that is, citizens of Slovakia who live and work permanently in Czechia. They can now also apply to the national selection and possibly represent Czechia as a Slovak. Now, why is this important? Well, there's a pretty interesting artist out there called Adonixis. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's spelled Adonxs. He is basically one of those artists, and he's actually from Slovakia, but currently he lives and works in Czechia. And in fact, it might be possible that he would apply, actually, because a few days ago, as of recording this, I'm recording this on the 1st of November, a few days ago, a Slovak songwriting camp took place where Selena was there for some reason, Selena from Taya and Selena, and another person that was there was Adonixis. So, we might see Adonixis apply for ESCZ and possibly represent Czechia in Eurovision 2024. Another possible name that I've seen is Barbara Markova. You might remember her from ESCZ 2019 and 2020, especially her latter submission with the song Black and White Holes, where it was like this car in the middle of the forest and it was like glowing and stuff from the inside, and yeah, super trippy music video, but a really, really cool song. And, after that, she went kind of quiet and she started working on her first album, which is apparently going to release soon. And recently, when someone commented on an Instagram post saying that, yeah, New York is cool, but going to Eurovision in Malmö is even cooler, or something like that. And Barbara Markova actually liked that comment, and so maybe, just maybe, she's interested in returning to the national final. But we'll have to see. With that said, let's move on to Denmark, who are returning to their national final, DMGP, Dansk Melody Grand Prix. And yeah, there's not really much to talk about. They're still going to have 8 participants, just one final. Basically, it's going to take place in some concert hall in Copenhagen for some reason. I don't know why they chose a concert hall, but there we are. And they've basically also talked about possibly changing their song selection strategy a little bit. Basically, they're apparently they're looking at what works in Eurovision and trying to select stuff for that, which isn't particularly encouraging, but hey, you do you. So yeah, Denmark are returning to DMGP. We haven't seen any possible artists yet, but I'm sure there will come a few eventually. Some people did note that Fear of Llama posted a new song after the 1st of September, and that's certainly possible. They might want to return, but who knows at this point. So yeah, that's about it for Denmark. We don't really have much to say. So if that's it, let's move on to Estonia, who are of course returning to the national final, escplus. And this year, there's been quite a few changes. Now, the biggest one is that there's only going to be one semifinal, where 15 artists will compete for 5 slots to go to the final. And there will also be 5 other artists in the initial roster who will be pre-qualified for the final, as if this were like pre-2023 MGP or something. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know why they wanted to do that, but I think I read somewhere that that's basically a lack of budget, even though they still want to do 20 songs for some reason. I don't really get it. But yeah, a couple of days before the submission deadline, it was reported that ER had received 12 songs, and so that naturally got a lot of people kind of worried, how are you going to have a 20-song national final if you can't even receive 20 songs? But in the end, it turned out well, and I think they actually received over 200 entries. So there's going to be a lot of listening to do, and it was certainly a lot better than the initial 12 number that they received. So yeah, with that said, you can see here the national final. The final of the national final takes place on the 17th, which is the same day as the MGP. And looking at the dates below, this might be our Super Saturday, but we don't know that for sure yet. With that said, let's move on to Finland, who are of course returning to their prestigious national final, UMK, or Uuden Musiikin Kilpailu, which is going to take place on the 10th of February next year, basically. And so far, they've already selected their 7 acts, basically, and I've given the hints on them on my blog post. I've posted them there, but you can, of course, just look it up. It's basically going to be a very exciting thing, and apparently there's going to be someone returning in the national finals. Some people suggest it could be Bess, some people suggest Erika Wikman, but who knows? It's going to be a returnee from a previous UMK, so we'll have to see who that exactly is. And we won't be able to see until January, when they will be announcing the artists and also posting their songs one by one, as they usually do. And with this, I also have a little bit of a personal announcement. In case you don't follow me on Twitter, I actually bought a ticket to UMK. I know that sounds bizarre. I already mentioned earlier that I'm actually gonna be going to Lithuania for an exchange, and yeah, during that time, I'll be going to lots of national finals, well, maybe a few national finals, and lots of pre-parties, and it's going to be great. Currently, I'm actually still dealing with my application. I'm still waiting for some documents to come in, but I am in the process of applying to go to Vilnius for basically 6 months to do a semester at Vilnius University, and yeah, during that time, I will be going to Finland to watch UMK, and let's see if I can get tickets to any other show. Um, but speaking of shows, I'm actually also going to be seeing Cornelia Jacobs in Malmö, and I'm so excited for that. I followed her since 2022, and I finally get to see her live. So yeah, that's going to be great. But let's get back to Eurovision for a sec, where France has confirmed participation, but they haven't really said much else. Same with Georgia. There were concerns that they would withdraw because the current government is actually a pro-Russian government. But no, Georgia will continue to take part in Eurovision 2024. Oh, by the way, if you hear like some drilling in the background, that's because the apartment next to us is doing a bit of renovation, so I do apologize for that. But yeah, with that said, next we have Germany, who are returning to a national final, but this year is called Das Deutsche Finale 2024. And the submissions have closed, and they announced that they had actually received 693 submissions, which is pretty huge, but they've also kind of posted the breakdown of how many of them are bands, how many of them are soloists, and how many of them are duos. And the national final itself will take place on the 16th of February, which is one day before the 17th. This always happens with Germany for some reason. They like to have national finals in late night on Fridays for some reason. So yeah, it's going to be on a Friday instead of a Saturday, and I think there's going to be 8 participants, none of which will be TikTok wildcards. By the way, they've removed that feature, and there's actually some different names in there, one of which is a favorite that is from Fall to Spring, which is this kind of rock band who was in the TikTok wildcard last year, I believe, but didn't really get anywhere. But this year they've directly gone for the submissions, and maybe they'll get through, maybe they won't. We'll see what happens. With that said, let's move on to Greece, who have internally selected the artist Marina Sati. Now, when this was announced, a lot of people were really excited because Marina Sati makes like really authentically Greek-sounding music. Her music really sounds Greek, even though her ancestry is like half Sudanese or something like that, but she of course was born and raised in Greece, and her music sounds very Greek. She sings in Greek, and so a lot of people got really excited. And also she's actually famous within Greece for once, so yeah, a lot of people got really excited. But then it was announced that she didn't actually have a song yet, and in fact ERT posted that they would open submissions until the 1st of December to accept any entries from any songwriters. Now, this immediately caused some concern. What if she ends up singing some sort of Melfest reject? But no, she has confirmed in interviews and such that she is going to be authentic, and she actually already has a few songs that are ready, and she has also approached several songwriters, both people that she had already worked with and also new songwriters. So yeah, her point is that she will be authentic, so I think that's going to be fine. And I think we're going to get some sort of ethnic bop in Greek, not the type of Evangelia type stuff, but more Marina Sati type stuff. That's the best way I can explain it. Is probably going to be mostly in Greek, hopefully. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Marina Sati is a pretty big artist in Greece, and so yeah, people are understandably excited. So with that said, let's move on to Iceland, which we don't really have much to say because it's Iceland. They don't really talk about much. Their artists don't really kind of announce that they have submitted to the national final. But what we do know is that the national final itself will take place on the 2nd of March, and the announcement of the artists will take place in late January on a show called Lögin I Sönvakeppninni or something like that, and the songs will be posted in February. So yeah, that's what we know about Iceland and Sönvakeppnin, which is their national final. With that said, let's move on to Ireland, where we don't really have much to say. Previously, I was expressing hope that maybe the show would be taken off of the Late Late Show, but then in a recent interview, the Irish head of delegation said that no, it's probably going to be on the Late Late Show again. So yeah, good luck, Ireland. I don't really have much else to say because there's really not much news. Right. So with that said, let's move on to Israel. Now, let me make this clear. I do not believe that any country which is actively murdering civilians should be taking part in Eurovision. However, this is Eurovision news, and what I'm about to say relates to Eurovision and Eurovision only. Now, okay, they're having a national final, allegedly. It's called Rising Star in English, and they had auditions in September. They basically picked out some of those auditionees, and they were supposed to broadcast the first episode of Rising Star yesterday, as I'm recording this. That is the 31st of October. However, it was cancelled, or the premiere was cancelled because of, and I quote, 2 dead IDF soldiers. Now, how did they die, you might ask? Well, the IDF were bombing a refugee camp. And in the kind of crossfire of all of that, they killed 2 of their own soldiers. Now, I'm not condoning the bad things that have been done by Hamas, but Hamas aren't taking part in Eurovision. Hell, they aren't even taking part in the United Nations. So I really, really do not think that Israel should be taking part in Eurovision. Not just 2024, but at all. I do not see why they were ever invited to the contest in the first place. But in case you are somehow interested in their Eurovision news, there you are. The first episode of Rising Star was supposed to happen yesterday on the 31st of October, and it didn't happen. And, you know, some people are speculating they might change to an internal selection, but I think I speak for many people when I say that we would just love to see them out of the contest. Fair enough. With that said, I'm not touching this topic again, not with a 10-foot pole. So let's move on to Italy, where we will be having the Festival of San Remo. Of course, that's their very prestigious festival that has been taking place even before Eurovision, and they will continue to use it to select their Eurovision entry. Now, this year, the entries, or rather the participants, will be announced in early December, as well as the, I think, 3 or 4 participants that are going to be there from San Remo Giovanni. Now, there's been a lot of rumors going around, as is tradition for Italy, but one name that's emerged in the last few days is Il Volo, who represented Italy in 2015 with Grande Amore. Now, this is controversial because recently in an interview, Il Volo expressed that they support the Italian Prime Minister, who is, for the lack of a better descriptor, fascist. So, yeah, that's kind of worrying, and you know, there's of course no shortage of problematic singers when it comes to Italy, and I'm sure more of them will just show up in San Remo eventually. It was also announced, on a brighter note, that Fiorello, who you might recognize as one of the hosts of talk shows in Italy, Fiorello has announced that he will be broadcasting his show from San Remo during the week of San Remo, and in fact, on the day of the final, he will actually be on stage with Amadeus. And Speaking of Amadeus, there are kind of discussions on whether they might want Amadeus to continue to host. Rai does, apparently. The Italian broadcaster want him to continue hosting, but he said he will step down for a little bit after this edition. So we don't really know what's going to happen there, but what we do know is that for sure Amadeus will continue to be hosting this edition of the contest. So yeah, that's Italy. With that said, let's move on to Latvia, where we'll be having the national final Supernova, which that's kind of about it. We don't really know any of the potential names for it, and the rules kind of remain the same from previous years. So let's move on to a country where the rules are not at all the same. With Lithuania, we are now having a national final Eurovizija.lt. As you might remember, in previous years we had Pabandomiš Naujo, which in Lithuanian means let's start again, or let's start from the beginning. But now they have renamed their national final to Eurovizija.lt. Eurovizija just meaning Eurovision. We don't really know why they did that, honestly, but what we do know is that there's going to be a super final in the national final, as if this brand change wasn't terrible enough. So basically, a super final is when the top three of the national final in the combined results go for another round of voting. This time is only the televote, and depending on the country, it might be the songs might be performed again, or they might just be like put in a recap as it is in Estonia. But in Lithuania, they will be performing the songs again, and the top three basically will be voted on by the audience and only the audience. So that's kind of disappointing. The 1 year I'm going to be going to Lithuania, Pabandomiš Naujo gets cancelled. So yeah, that's great news, I'm sure. You can see here the national final. The final of the national final will take place on the 10th or 17th, because they said in their article that they mentioned the starting date of the national final, but they said there will be, and I quote, 4 or 5 semifinals. So we don't know for sure which day we will have the final of Eurovizija.lt. So if that's it, let's move on to Luxembourg, who are returning to the contest after 30 years of not doing the contest, blah blah blah. You've heard it all before. They are having a national final, of which the name we do not know, and it will take place on the 27th of January. This is pretty early compared to, a lot of these other February national finals. And I think I read somewhere, I don't know if that's confirmed for sure, but I think there's going to be 8 participants in the final roster, basically. And there's been a lot of interested names. In fact, they revealed that they received about 659 submissions, which is huge for a country like Luxembourg, which is much, much smaller than any of its neighbors. You need to remember that Germany only got 693, and Germany is much larger country than Luxembourg, but Luxembourg still got 659 submissions, which is absolutely huge. So yeah, the people of Luxembourg are clearly interested in the contest. So yeah, we don't really know much else though. They said a while back that they would announce the name of the national finals soon, but that was, I think, in August or September. So yeah, it's been a while. So we don't really have much news these past few months from Luxembourg. Although we do have a few of the names that are interested in participating, one of which is Ralph Siegel, who was one of the most famous Eurovision songwriters from Germany in the previous century, and he is now interested in Luxembourg with a singer from Luxembourg. So yeah, that's interesting. With that said, let's move on to Malta, where we are having the national final MESC, or Malta Eurovision Song Contest. Now, the reason I say we are having, in this case, it's not actually future tense. In fact, the first semifinal took place a few days ago on the 27th of October, and I of course missed it because for some reason I decided to go to sleep extra early. But yeah, the first semifinal took place on the 27th, and basically they had 9 artists sing their own songs. And what's weird about the voting system is that this is pretty much a showcase, and because no voting takes place until all of the songs have been performed, and the next show will take place on the 3rd of November, where they will have another 9 artists perform their songs. Now, among them are a few recognizable names. For example, Kurt Kalea or Chalea. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's not the same Kurt Chalea who represented Malta previously, and even more confusingly, they had the actual Kurt Kalea appear on stage while the newer Kurt Chalea was singing. So it's really confusing. But another name that you might recognize is Matt Black. Black spelled with an X, of course. That's also he's also returning with a song named Banana, so that's going to be interesting. And there's also a few other names returning that I can't remember right now, including Eliana Gomez Blanco, I think that's her name, who represented Malta in Junior Eurovision 2019. She also did MESC last year, I believe. So yeah, that's Malta. They had their first semi-final a few days ago, and in the next few days we're going to have another semifinal, but there's going to be, I believe, 4 semifinals until all of the songs are kind of showcased, and then after that we have the voting to get into the final, which will take place, as you can see here, on January. After that we have Moldova, which we don't really have much to talk about because it was Moldova. They're traditionally very secretive until they announce their national final and whatnot. And this year, I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen except, Moldova itself. So, yeah, with that said, that's Moldova. Nothing much to say. Let's move on to the Netherlands, where they are returning to having an internal selection. And this year, they announced that they received over 600 submissions as well. I believe it was more than Luxembourg, but it was a very huge number as well. And it goes to show that after not qualifying, the artists of the Netherlands are actually more motivated to take part in Eurovision. Now, there's been a few names going around, and also, it was announced, I think, yesterday that the decision will be made in December, so there's a little bit more waiting to do now. And initially I think it was this month, but they've pushed it back to December, just like yesterday, I think. And basically, there's a few names going around, but the main one that a lot of people are talking about is Joost Klein. He's a singer from the Netherlands, and he's been really, really pushing this campaign to do Eurovision, especially for 2024. He's even met up with Carrier, for God's sake, when Carrier did a show in the Netherlands. So, they might even do a collaboration together, which is super interesting. But, one name that everyone is talking about is Joost Klein. Another name that people have been talking about is Numidia, who I believe was on the show Beste Zangers. And so those are some of the names that people are talking about, but of course, from 600 entries, there's bound to be more. They did mention also that most of the songs were in English, obviously, but over 100 of them are in Dutch, so that's very interesting as well. So that said, let's move on to Norway, where, relative to last month, we don't really have much to talk about, but if you missed all of that, just in case, basically, this year, they've changed the rules so that any song released after the 1st of September will be eligible to take part in MGP 2024. Now, one possible name from there is Rayleigh or Riley. I still don't know how to pronounce it. Who basically posted a song, I believe, on the 1st of September precisely, and so people are speculating that she might be interested in taking part in MGP again. Another name is Kano or Kaino. Now that's interesting because obviously they represented Norway in 2019 and tried to return in 2021, and now they're writing more songs. But interestingly, they posted in Instagram "Nu kör vi," yeah, which is the kind of unofficial slogan of Melodifestivalen in Sweden. So maybe we'll see more Norwegians take part in Sweden's national final. And keep that thought. We'll come back to that. But in the meantime, let's move on to Poland, who hasn't really said anything because recently I would reckon they're pretty busy with their elections. But yeah, they're taking part in Eurovision 2024 as expected, and there's probably going to be some sort of national final. Is it going to be having a long ass name? Who knows? We'll have to see what happens. One possible name is Justina from Eurovision 1995, I think, and she might be interested in returning because interestingly, she's actually continued to make music since then, and she said that she has a song that might be interesting for Eurovision, although she says also that she doesn't know whether she will enter because she's booked like 50 concerts in the following year already. So we'll have to see what happens. Previously, there were speculation that they had internally selected either Dominik Dudek or Kuba Szmajkowski. However, with the change in government, maybe that's changed. I don't really know. Maybe the corruption in the TVP is still there, but we'll see what happens. With that said, let's move on to Portugal, who are having their national final Festival da Canção, and after the submission closed, they announced that they had received 809 entries. That's almost as many as Spain, as we'll talk about later. But per capita, that is far, far more than Spain, and almost rivals Luxembourg in terms of number of entries per capita, basically. So that's a huge, huge number, and hell, it exceeds Germany's total number. So yeah, there's a very clear interest in Portugal to represent Portugal in Eurovision, and out of those 809, unfortunately, only 6 of them will be selected, with the other 14 being songwriters that will be approached by RTP to personally take part in the national final. So there will be 14 private, I guess, songwriters, and then 6 from public submissions. And I think they will eventually increase the quota for that, because last year Mimi Cat actually was a public submission and she won the whole festival. So maybe they'll expand that even more, because last year was actually 3 public submissions. This year it's 6, and next year, who knows, maybe 12, 10, whatever. So yeah, they're currently in the process of selecting those artists, and I read somewhere that the public selection process actually completed just yesterday as recording this, on the 31st of October. With that said, let's move on to San Marino, who are returning to the national final. Una voce per San Marino. Now, this year it's been announced that I'm pretty sure it's a rule now that they are allowed to, applicants are allowed to audition online, so they don't actually have to travel to San Marino except for the final, if they do get in the final. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's also going to they're also going to reintroduce the big category of artists, which basically they removed, I think, in 2023 alone, because before then it was Achille Lauro who was from the big category and he won. So yeah, this year they're reintroducing the big category thing. Maybe they're trying to pull a few more artists from like San Remo and such, but we'll have to see what happens. They're returning to the national final, and it will take place on the 2nd of March next year, and that's about all we know. That said, let's move on to Serbia, who are also returning to the national final. If you're playing a drinking game where you take a shot every time I say returning to national final, you must be dead by now. Anyways, they are returning to the national final, Serbia, and we don't know much yet. We know that currently, what we know so far is that the submission deadline has been extended to the 10th of November. So some people were concerned about this, but I have read that they do extend the deadline every year pretty much. So yeah, there's nothing to be worried about there. And one of those interested names would include Philip Balos, who was a favorite in Pesma za Eurovision 2023. You might remember the song Novi Plan Drugi San, which was his song. He actually wrote and produced it all by himself, which was really impressive, and he also showed up at a bunch of pre-parties. Recently, he posted a new single called Sami, so you can check that out if you're interested. And he said, apparently, according to some Serbian Eurovision news, that he has a song for Pesma za Eurovision 2024. So that's going to be interesting. What's also going to be interesting is Zoria. I mentioned this in previous episodes. Basically, Zoria from Pesma za Eurovision 2022, I think, was also a favorite, and she says that she's possibly also going to return. So we'll have to see what happens. And that said, let's move on to Slovenia, who have also ditched their national final, their previous national final. And obviously, you might remember they were hosting EMA in previous years, but this year they've started a new thing called Missia Malmö. You might remember last year when they had so-called Missia Liverpool, I think, and that was basically just a showcase for Joker out. But this year, Missia Malmö actually refers to a national final, and this year there will be 4 participants. They're kind of like doing it UMK style, but there will be 4 participants, and the submissions are open now. And some names that are possible, I'm just throwing it out there. Raven and also July Jones. I think those are 2 kind of hotly discussed possible participants in this national final, but we'll have to see what happens, of course, and maybe also Luma as well. And yeah, so that's Slovenia. They're having a new national final called Missia Malmö, which will take place in January. We don't know the exact dates yet, and there will be 4 participants, and that's about it. With that said, let's move on to Spain, who are returning to the national final, Benidorm Fest. There were initially some concerns when the old head of delegation from the 2010s announced that she was going to return, and the actually competent co-head of delegation was basically fired. There were some concerns there. However, that's kind of started to dissipate, and people are still really excited about Benidorm Fest. After submissions were closed, they announced, I don't remember the exact number for this one, but I think it was somewhere around 825. Yes, it was 825 submissions, which numerically is less than previous years. However, the difference is that this year 825 means songs that also have a singer, and previous years there were a lot of songs that had not been assigned any singers, and so this year is actually an absolute record, because this means that all 825 songs have a singer assigned to them one way or another, and there's a lot of names in there. And if you're interested, I actually kind of collected all of the names on my blog post, link in the description. So yeah, the national final, or the final of the national final, will take place on the 3rd of February, and as usual, there's going to be 2 semifinals, and of course, being Benidorm Fest is going to take place in Benidorm, and yeah, that's pretty much it for Spain. And the one reason people are so excited still is that one of the new selection committee members is Raiden, who you might remember from Benidorm Fest 2022 with Calle de la Joyeria, whose song was a big favorite, but he only ended up like fifth, I think. But yeah, he recently announced that he was gonna retire from doing music, but now it seems like he's got a job at RTVE looking at Eurovision songs, or potential ones anyway. With that said, let's move on to Sweden. Of course, they are the host country, and Melodifestivalen is coming up quick and fast. Now, we've already gotten the dates, we've gotten the locations of all the heats and such, and like I mentioned in previous episodes, there's not going to be an Under Hansen anymore, there's going to be a fifth heat. So basically, there's going to be 30 songs, and each heat will select 2 songs out of 5, I believe. So yeah, that's going to be one of the format changes. And another big thing is that the participation list is starting to come together. Now, this was actually just reported yesterday, but we might have Clara Klingenström returning to the contest. Now, previously they had reported all of these: Lasse Stefans, Smash Into Pieces, Dotter, you might remember her as a favorite in 2021, Liamu, Samir och Viktor, Electra, who, if you don't know her, she's basically a drag queen, I think, in Sweden, Cassiopeia, Lisa Ajax, Marcus Martinus, and then, like I mentioned earlier, Clara Klingenström and Adam Woods. Now, that is an absolutely huge list, and some people have called it Melodifestivalen All Stars, and some people are like, the artists really hate going overseas, but yeah, we'll see what happens. That so far seems like a really good list, and more will come, presumably, by the reporting of Aftonbladet. Now, the thing to note about Aftonbladet is that they don't get everything right. That would be kind of hard for them. But in general, Aftonbladet tends to get like at most like 2 or 3 off from the actual number, the actual list, for example. So yeah, that means that with any good luck, we might have, like I said, Clara Klingenström and Dotter in the same edition, and that is absolutely insane. So I think Sweden are shaping up to be another really strong host country. So with that said, let's move on to Switzerland, who are returning to a national final. Like I mentioned earlier, like earlier on in the year, they had a songwriting camp called Suiza, and some of the songs from there are probably going to end up in this selection, and that's about it. We don't have any like precise dates for when the artist will be announced, but you can presume that it's going to be in 2024 rather than this year. So with that said, let's move on to Ukraine, who are of course returning to their national final Vidbeer, and this year, unlike previous few years, it will take place in February instead of December. Now, there's going to be no semifinals, unfortunately, but there will be 10 artists in the final, basically 9 of which will be selected by an internal jury, and 1 of which will be selected by the public through a 20 long list, basically. And yeah, so there's going to be according to recent reports, there have been 389 submissions from 288 performers, and the long list will be announced by the 9th of November, which is only a little over a week away. And according to the producer of Vidbeer, he has said that there are, and I quote, 4 smashing hits, 10 potential hits, and a few interesting comebacks. So yeah, there's something to look forward to, I guess. And like I mentioned, the long list, which will be 20 long, I believe, will be posted on the 9th of November, so you can look out for that as well. And In terms of the language composition, it was also reported that there were 58% of the songs were in Ukrainian, 33% of them were in English, and the rest were bilingual or in other languages. But if you add it up, 58 plus 33 plus 9 equals 100. So it's safe to say that there's only like 1 or 2 songs in other languages. So yeah, that's Ukraine. With that said, let's move on to the final country in our so far confirmed list, and that is the UK. Now, we haven't gotten any indication on when the artist will be announced, but what we do know is that in a recent press release, they said that the searching for the artist took place over the summer, in the past tense. So this strongly suggests that they've already selected someone. They're just not announcing who it is yet. Some of the people from the Eurotrip podcast tried to ask about that, but they of course wouldn't respond. But yeah, the press release did say the search for the artist took place over the summer. So again, it highly suggests that this artist has been selected, but what do we know? So those are the countries that we have pretty much 100% confirmed in the contest, and let's move on to some other countries. Now, first off, we have North Macedonia. Now, I mentioned in the previous episode that basically they had put in their budget that North Macedonia will take part in Eurovision 2024. However, it was also reported that they were still kind of discussing the whole thing. But then in the last few days, it was reported that not only are they pretty much confirmed, they're also potentially bringing back Skopje Fest. If you remember Skopje Fest from, I think, the 2000s, that was their kind of national final. But then I also saw that they might bring back Skopje Fest, but then decided it was too expensive for 2024. So maybe in 2025 we will have the return of Skopje Fest as the national final for North Macedonia. So yeah, I think North Macedonia, after a year of absence, will be returning to the contest. Another country that's been hotly discussed is Romania. There were a lot of fears that Romania would withdraw from the contest because they were not qualifying very well, and there was also a lot of kind of money laundering within the delegation and within TVR. However, in the last few days, we have seen reports that the government of Romania has approved the budget for TVR and will approve the budget for Eurovision 2024. So, yeah, this is very interesting, and this suggests strongly that Romania will indeed be in Eurovision 2024, but we don't know that for sure yet. Again, we do not have the participation list, and the next country I will talk about a bit more about why we don't have it yet, and that country is, of course, Australia. Now, basically the contracts that would allow Australia to participate without needing an invitation ended last year. So in 2023, it was the last year where they didn't need to get invited to take part in Eurovision. So this year they are now in negotiations, basically. In fact, yesterday, as of recording this, you can see 31st of October, the people from SBS said on a talk show that they will be broadcasting Eurovision 2024, but they are still basically negotiating whether they will take part in the contest. And this isn't just with the EBU, by the way. This is also in terms of funding, because in case you didn't know, Australia isn't actually very well funded when it comes to Eurovision. A lot of the artists have had to look for like loans or grants or basically alternate sources of funding for the Eurovision entries. Like I mentioned earlier, Voyager were actually funded by the government of Western Australia, and other participants have also had to find their own sources to kind of take part in Eurovision at all. So I think that's part of the discussions mentioned here, and of course they're also discussing with the EBU, whether they can still take part, and tentatively I think they want them in, but who knows that for sure. So yeah, Australia is still being talked about, and undoubtedly Israel is still being talked about. So yeah, I think if you were expecting a participation list to come out in the next few days, you will probably be disappointed. So yeah, there's that. I also kind of want to talk about Monaco and Slovakia. With Monaco, they basically posted a statement explaining that this year they just didn't have time to get everything in order to take part in Eurovision. So maybe in 2025 we will have Monaco return to the contest. And with Slovakia, now this is a bit complicated. Now, initially, there were very positive signs that Slovakia would return to the contest because the new director general actually, talked about Slovakia taking part in the contest. But then the elections took place, and now a pro-Russia party was elected, and now we don't really know what happens. Maybe he'll go the route of Viktor Orban, for example. So we don't know that for sure, but Slovakia, there is still some hope that they will return next year, but we don't know that for sure. So with that said, let's move on to other aspects of the contest. First off, we have production. You can see this is the team right here, and one of the main names in there, one of the more interesting names, is Christer Björkman. Now, you might recognize him from producing recent Melody Festivalen. In fact, he was in this post until 2021, after which he went and did the whole, American Song Contest thing. And before that, he also did Eurovision 2013, so he'll be returning to work on a contest again in Malmö. So yeah, you can see there's that, and you can see also more discussion about the budget. You can see here that Malmö will contribute around 30 million Swedish krona, or around 2.5 million euro to the budget of the contest. Now, speaking of budget, it's been reported as well that SVT is facing a cut of around 200 million krona. Now, obviously, not all of that is going to Eurovision, but 200 million krona is around 17 million euros. So, again, like previous Swedish hosted Eurovisions, get ready for a cheap one. So we'll have to see what they're cutting, in the name of cost and in the name of concision. So after that, yeah, we don't really have much else. There were a number of changes, and the allocation draw is here. Nothing special to talk about there. And after that, they're also looking to maybe reform the whole voting system, especially in terms of the jury. But they haven't really made a decision yet, and it's going to be announced in January. It was also mentioned that they will ban AI generated content, and I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but yeah, they maintain that creativity should come from humans and not from machines. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is blown way out of proportion. I don't know why it's even included here. Carolina Norean is, I believe, a radio commentator for SVT, and she personally thought that the whole Big Five thing was unfair, but people have blown this way out of proportion. She's just a commentator. She doesn't work in any of the decision-making departments, so I'm not sure why this is included here, and because it's not going to make any difference. In fact, I believe that people were asking Martin Osterdahl about the whole Big Five thing, and also Christer Björkman, and basically they pretty much reaffirmed that there will be a Big Five. So yeah, this isn't going to change anything. I don't know why it's included here. So yeah, after that, we also have the fact that SVT are trying to reduce runtime of the grand final. In fact, they say that they're trying to cut it by up to an hour. And yeah, that's about it. There's these broadcasts, which you can see here. Australia will broadcast the show. It's not confirmed whether they will take part yet, but we'll have to see. And yeah, that's pretty much it here. And one thing that isn't mentioned here are the pre-parties. Now, we don't have a lot of pre-parties. A lot of them are the same ones as previous years. We have Barcelona, we have Madrid, we have Amsterdam, which, by the way, I bought a ticket for. So if you're in Amsterdam for Eurovision and concert, say hi, maybe. There's also going to be a new kind of, I don't know if it's really called a pre-party or a during party, because it's actually going to be like a party taking place during Eurovision week. There's I believe tickets going for Malmö and also for Copenhagen. So if you're there and if you're a party person, absolutely go check it out. I can't remember the exact name. I think it's called like Nordic Party or something like that. I'll put it on the screen right now. And yeah. So that's about it for Eurovision 2024. And what we know so far about it as of the 31st of October of 2023. So with that said, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming content from myself, including I will be doing a kind of a little vlog when I go to Vilnius, and also eventually to Amsterdam, to Tampere, and eventually, of course, to Malmö. And yeah, so subscribe so you don't miss that kind of stuff, and I'll see you next time.